Welcome back to Meaning Making Matrix, where I'll look at topics and the research related to meaning and motivation. And today we're looking at a study called Cross-Cultural Perceptions of Meaning and Goals in Adulthood, Their Roots and Relations with Happiness. Thus, looking at how cultures affect how we set goals and establish meaning, taking into account eudaimonic and hedonic values. Meaning, it's a study looking at meaning topics in relations to well-being. And if I understand eudaimonic and hedonic, these terms correctly, eudaimonic refers to more like meaning and importance and those kind of things, and hedonic is more like the emotions, happiness, and the emotional aspects, if you will. And looking at the background of this study, they are referring to, among others, Csikszentmihalyi. I do not know how to pronounce that, but he's a guy that's known for flow, or the flow state. They're also referring to Martin Seligman, which is known for learned helplessness. And he is working in the area of positive psychology. He's also written some books like Authentic Happiness. And they're also referring to the PERMA model, which Martin Seligman is also one of the people behind, which looks at positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement as aspects that is important, or aspects of well-being, a good life, so to speak. And looking at what have been studied before, quote, previous studies have clearly shown that subjective well-being and psychological well-being contribute to well-being in different ways and can operate independently of each other, according to a study by Delfava, Brother, and others in 2011, and another study by Huta and Ryan in 2010. This makes sense, seeing as a subjective well-being, being how you interpret your well-being yourself, is a very different perspective than the actual psychological well-being, the psychology of the individual, because that is like how well you actually operate as opposed to how you think you operate, in a sense. And they are also, the sample size is 666, and the participants is from 7 countries, making it, it is 78 on the low end and 104 on the high end per country, which is kind of low, to be honest, in terms of statistics. If we're going to make any kind of assumptions on the cultural pattern of the country. But you get some kind of idea, so this is kind of a mixed study. It seems based both on some quantitative but also some qualitative aspects. They also divide the countries into 3 cultural groups based on my bad there, on Anglo-Saxon heritage, English, which they in the study mostly refer to as Germanic groups, and the Romanic Latin languages, which mostly refers to as Romanic or Roman groups, and the Slavic, which they refer to as, yeah, we'll see. I don't remember at the moment. Looking at the participants and their meaning references, asking them some questions, quote, participants were asked to define happiness in their own words, to list their 3 main goals and explain why the goals are important, and list the 3 most meaningful things in their life, and then explain why they are meaningful. Which is an interesting way to put it, because then that suggests that there is a difference between what goals people set and what they consider meaningful. So some goals may not be considered as meaningful as it is prioritized. And as some results on those questions, quote, participants providing psychological definitions of happiness refer to eudaimonic dimensions such as balance, meaning, and development more often than they did to hedonic dimensions such as satisfactions and positive emotions. And more than not, they refer to interpersonal relationships rather than spirituality and community. And that kind of goes to show what my points are in making these videos, that meaning dimensions or eudaimonic dimensions might play a more important role in our lives than we are aware of. But it's kind of strange to my mind that they had less focus on spirituality or community, but it might make sense in terms of the fact that most of these societies are kind of individualized, if you will, as opposed to communitarian. Looking at some results based on the table presented in the next slide, the cultural differences overall isn't too big, but there is some outliers. Like satisfaction is significantly more predominant in Croatia, the Slavic countries. It's more, they refer to that as Croatia. And the Roman focus way less on freedom and autonomy. Freedom/autonomy. The Germanic focus significantly more on optimism, and interestingly, the Romans focused noticeably less on family and health than the other 2 groups. Which, interestingly, because, well, maybe referring to the family focus on the mafia aspect, which have been something that has been, if you will, programmed into us in movies. May or may not be true. Spirituality, or quote, spirituality emerged as both a goal and meaningful things in Germanic groups because almost exclusively contributed of the South African participants. But again, a average more or less of 95 per country is on the low end if we're going to make some statistics, if you will, on the average of a country in terms of cultural effects. So this would have to be studied more to see if that holds true on the broader scale. But here's the table referred to in the previous slide, where you can see that it's more or less the same, with some few things that is different. There was an insignificant result of engagement and growth in Croatian, but a somewhat large size in Germanic, as you can see here. And there is way less on well-being compared to Romans in dramatic compared to Romans in well-being, a very low number on freedom and autonomy on Romans, and down in the domain related we can see not too much difference, to be honest. Some more results. From a graph in the study, personal life and family was the two largest areas of meaningful topics and goals that were listed among participants, this is a quantitative reference, if you will, because that is not true in the qualitative numbers, which you will see later on. The group differences were detected for competence, reported significantly higher share of the Roman participants, and self-actualization emphasized by Germanic participants. If this still holds true, if you were to do a larger scale study, I don't know, but that's what this study here finds. In figure 11.2 on the next slide summarizes the participants' answers to the questions why the goal is important and why meaningful things is meaningful. So here we can see the differences between what goals people set and what they do consider important. And as I did mentioned, here we see family and work in both meaningful things, and goals is listed as with the highest types of answers or reasons. Even though another graph looking at the total number of answers, relationships was number 2. But we also can see here that other than family and work, the rest are not in the same order of importance, if you will. In goals, health is number 3, but in meaningful things, health is number 4. And in meaningful things, relationships is number 3, but in terms of goals, it's number 4, 5, 6. So people don't have like too many relationship goals, but they still consider relationships a meaningful thing, which is interesting. Mainly in relation to what I found in my bachelor's paper, which had a strong correlation between what people consider meaningful and what they consider important, but I did not directly look at goals and reasons. Some more results. Quote, this comparative analysis, this study, substantially reflects the cumulative findings reported in another study by Delefave Brother, not sure how that's pronounced, and others in 2011 for the international sample. Participants across countries reported the highest level of happiness and meaningfulness in 4 main domains: family, health, interpersonal relations, and personal growth, which does make sense because throughout history and in most stories told by movies and TV series, we see the focus on family, health, and growth, and personal relationships. So, no surprise there. Further, quote, across groups, the percentage of participants reporting work as a goal and a meaningful thing was second only to the percentage of those reporting family, showing that family and work is the 2 main sources for meaningful things and fulfillment across cultures. Work then, of course, referring to achievement motivation. I managed to do this, I can provide for my family, kind of things. But this is the qualitative results. The quantitative, as I referred to earlier, shows work as number 7 on the list of topics, where family was on top. So, depending on how you look at it, how you interpret the results, what perspective, work is either high or low on the list, but family and relationships is mostly high on the list. Further quote, the predominant motive underlying meaningful things was their intrinsic value and relevance in participants' life. Another quote, this apparently recursive outcome suggests that things perceived as meaningful are intrinsically valuable, thus suggesting the importance of meaning and the process of meaning making as substantial dimensions of well-being. So the results they refer to here kind of just proves the point in me, or the reason, if you will, of why I'm making these videos focusing on meaning and motivation, as it shows it is an important and also perceived importance in people's life. Like the meaningful things are intrinsically valuable and thus an important aspect of well-being. But it doesn't really seem that most people look at meaning as, if you will, meaningful. But yeah, studies kind of, this study and what I can see kind of suggests that meaning is like a prime motivator. So in conclusion, quote, cultural comparisons reveal more similarities than differences. However, this statement is particularly contradicted by the low levels of happiness and meaningfulness in participants associated with community and societal issues, which could represent a sign of disengagement from collective needs. Which kind of shows both that yes, the numbers is a little bit low, and the fact that they didn't have high levels of happiness does affect the numbers. Especially when, yes, the focus or subjective importance of community and spirituality was low, suggesting that if that is a reason, then that might be a necessity, if you will, or an aspect of what gives you happiness. Because the community is important for us, even if we don't really focus on it. And the study looked at hedonic and eudaimonic aspects of well-being among its factors and found, quote, this results points to a rich and complex picture of ingredients of well-being skewed to the eudaimonic side, which kind of proves my point. Showing that, yes, meaning aspects, if you will, what actually matters in life is more important to the emotional happiness, engagement, well, engagement on both sides, but still. Thanks for watching, and I hope you find this useful and will watch more of my videos, and please comment on what you think below. If you want to read this study yourself, you can find it at the address here, or if you search for the DOI number here. I will also link the study in the description of this video. I see many people that lack motivation as a result of not enough meaning in their lives. You might wonder what meaning has to do with motivation. My bachelor's paper shows that what people consider meaningful is also what they consider important. And if something is important enough, We will do it. This tells me that meaning is important for motivation. Tom Bailu, among others, have stated, quote, "Humans are meaning-making machines." My goal here is to help people learn more about themselves and help them find a long-term meaningful goal in life. So if you have not found your interest and struggle with motivation, you might want to visit my website at whori.org and see if this is for you. Which is here. You can either contact me here or look around and see if it's for you, and if it still is, you can contact me here. Or if you want to know more, you can click this link to schedule a call. I am located in Norway, and if you want a physical meeting with me, that can be arranged, and my Norwegian website is kvenreg.org, which looks more or less the same. And with that, I wish you well on your journey.